Hey, how's it going and welcome to another video. So with Shin Megami Tensei 5 on the horizon, it seems like there's a lot of renewed interest in the SMT series. As a result, it seems like there's a lot more people who are willing to check out some of the older titles in the series to kind of prepare themselves. You know, I get asked pretty often, like, what's a good game to start with, or is this a good game to kind of get into the series with? And I figured I'd put this video together as kind of a compilation of mini recommendations for games that I think you should check out before trying SMT 5. So if any of these catch your eye, definitely check them out, they're all great games. And if you're excited for SMT 5, consider checking out my Nahobino shirt, available now at fithersjail.com. So one of the first games that I always recommend to people wanting to get into the series is Digital Devil Saga. I really like Digital Devil Saga, and I think it works really well as kind of a highlight of the whole series. If you're looking for something a little bit more story and character driven, this is right up your alley. Digital Devil Saga, I think, has one of the best stories of the entire series. If you like the idea of demonic gang wars, then this is the game for you. The plot centers around the main character Surf, as well as his gang, the Embryon, who are all turned into demons and forced to fight other gangs in the Junkyard. Plus, the newly transformed gangs of the Junkyard now have a sudden unquenchable hunger for demonic flesh. So I lied, it's actually about cannibalistic demon gang wars. Yes, it is the coolest thing ever. Plus, beyond the really good story, it has a really great cast of characters. There's Argala, the most compassionate member of the group, Cielo, who's kind of a jokester, Gale, who's very serious and straight-faced. Plus, there's a lot of really memorable side characters. All of the leaders of the various gangs are memorable in their own way. So if you really like something that's more kind of character-focused, this is definitely the game for you. The game also has an extremely fun and very customizable combat system. You can pretty much flesh out any of your characters with any build that you can think of. It's very free-flowing, very customizable, and extremely fun to experiment with. Plus, I think the game also has the perfect kind of blend of difficulty. It's challenging for sure, but it never really feels overwhelmingly hard. The dungeons are definitely tricky, but nothing that'll make you pull your hair out. Some of the bosses are pretty tough, but it's nothing that you can't overcome. SMT is pretty well known for its difficulty, and I think this game does a really good job kind of easing you into it. Don't get me wrong, it is a challenging game, but it feels more or less fair. So yeah, Digital Devil Saga is awesome, one of my favorite games in the series. It's available on PS2 and the PlayStation 3's PSN store, and one that I think is absolutely worth checking out. Anyways, I'm gonna throw this next recommendation over to Nam's Compendium. Take it away, Nam.
The PlayStation 2 era is filled with some of the best titles from the Megami Tensei franchise. We saw the continuation of the Persona series, a new take on the Devil Summoner games, and even the creation of the cult classic Digital Devil Saga. These are all great games in their own right, but if there was one game that I had to recommend for everyone to play before Shin Megami Tensei 5, it would have to be SMT Nocturne. Nocturne is the third number installment in the mainline SMT series, and is easily one of the most popular games in the franchise. You play as a high school student who, after surviving the world-ending event known as the Conception, transforms into a half-human, half-demon known as the Demi-Fiend. From then on, it's your goal to travel the destroyed Tokyo to not only find your friends, but to also learn the truth behind the Conception. Much like other SMT games, the main plot is pretty simple, and the real depth of the narrative comes from the discussion around the characters' philosophies. However, Nocturne manages to separate itself from the other games since it puts a twist on the classic alignment system. While reasons are functionally similar, they break away from the standard law chaos neutral debate and instead focus on human ideals, which makes for a refreshing experience if you've played the other games. In terms of the core gameplay, Nocturne was the first game in the series to use the now famous press turn combat system. By exploiting enemy weaknesses and landing critical hits, you can earn more turns in combat. It's a very basic system on paper, but there's actually a lot of depth and on-the-fly decision making to be had when you get creative. This system was received so well that it became a staple in the series, and each game it's featured in attempts to add a new spin to the formula. While this may make Nocturne look lacking in comparison, I'd argue that the simplicity of the mechanics is actually in the game's favor. Everything you need to know about the combat system is taught to the player at the start of the game, and from then on, Nocturne's difficulty comes from how it tests the player on those mechanics. Nocturne's difficulty has been greatly exaggerated in my opinion. While the game is challenging, the key to success relies on the player's ability to master the press turn system. Once you get the hang of the general idea and learn the importance of buffs and debuffs, you'll find yourself with a very fun and rewarding JRPG. The most accessible way to play Nocturne is through the HD remaster that was released for PS PS4, Switch, and PC. This version of the game features some quality of life improvements, such as native widescreen support, voice acting, and manual skill inheritance for fusion. However, if you're feeling old school, there's always the PS2 original. It's about $10 on the PS3's PlayStation Network store, but cheap physical copies of the games are more common than you might think. It just depends on where you look. The PS2 version also comes with the benefit of including Devil May Cry's Dante as a guest character for no extra charge, which is quite possibly the coolest bit of cross-promotion in any video game. No matter the version, however, Nocturne is a great game that you should all check out before diving into SMT5.
Big shout out to Nam's Compendium for his contribution. Definitely check him out if you haven't already. I'll have a link to his channel in the description. He does great, very thorough reviews on the games in the series. So if you're looking for a really fleshed out review of a certain game, definitely check him out. So my next recommendation is actually both of the Devil Survivor games. One pretty common misconception I see is that Devil Survivor 1 and 2 are direct sequels to each other, when that's not the case. The two games are pretty much completely removed from each other. So if Devil Survivor 2 happens to interest you more, then you can just start with that one. But yeah, I really like the Devil Survivor games. And I think especially if you're more familiar with Persona, these games are a great way to kind of jump into the larger series. The Devil Survivor games have a very similar time management system and a greater focus on the characters. The major difference is that in Devil Survivor, the time moves in increments of 30 minutes, which means every day lasts a lot longer and feels a lot more impactful. At least when it comes to Devil Survivor 1, my absolute favorite thing about it is its setting. Devil Survivor takes place in a military lockdown of Tokyo after a demon infestation starts. You and your friends are given comps which allow you to summon and control these demons, and your character is also gifted with the ability to see how many days people have to live. It all comes together to make a really great, oppressive story and setting. It's a really shitty situation to be in, and it makes for a really enjoyable and memorable experience. And departing from some of the other games in the series, Devil Survivor actually has a strategy role-playing game setup, think similar to like Fire Emblem. You move your characters on a grid and engage in really fast-paced sort of micro-battles. These fights only last 1 or 2 turns at a time, so they're really quick bursts of adrenaline with very high damage output. There's a ton of replay value since there's a lot of different endings, and characters can and will die depending on the choices you make throughout the story. Then we have Devil Survivor 2. Like I said, it has nothing to do with the first game, so if this one just happens to interest you more, you can definitely start with this one. Devil Survivor 2 maintains the same combat and time management systems, but has a totally different plot and cast of characters. Similar to the first game, a military lockdown and demon infestation is happening, but the main difference is it's completely bonkers and off-the-wall story. The main threat are the Septetrions, alien demon lifeforms that have come to wipe out humanity. You and your friends work together with the secret organization Gyps to fight off the invaders. Yes, it is essentially Evangelion SMT, and it's awesome. The crazy plans they come up with to try and defeat these aliens is honestly some of the most entertaining shit you'll ever see in the entire series. Plus, the different characters have differing worldviews on how to handle the situation, what's best for humanity. There's multiple endings depending on the choices that you make, and similar to the first game, characters can and will die. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more wacky, I highly recommend Devil Survivor 2. They're both great games, they're both available on DS, and they both have an updated release on the 3DS. Definitely consider checking them out. The Devil Survivor games are awesome. And like I said, I think if you're coming from Persona, this is kind of the perfect place to jump in. And for my final recommendation, this one is honestly more of kind of a wild card, but why not check out the original Shin Megami Tensei 1? Now this obviously comes with the caveat that this is an old ass game. It has a lot of very 90s RPG design decisions. Graphics don't look the best. Menus look like they came from a DOS game, but in spite of all that, I do think that SMT1 is genuinely a good experience and something that I think you should at least kind of fuck around with. If for nothing else, you can definitely at least see the kind of evolution of the series. I think going from SMT1 looking the way it does to SMT5 with its beautiful graphics is gonna be quite the experience, so I think this one's definitely worth checking out for historical reasons. But I think where SMT1 really succeeds is in its great story and really fucking depressing atmosphere. SMT1 starts out pleasant enough, but Imagine everything possible going wrong, and it manages to get worse than that. Despite its age, I really do think it's held up just in terms of, its storytelling and its setting, and just kind of the misery that it inflicts on you. And I think it does a really good job kind of presenting a semi-realistic view of, like, a post-apocalyptic world. Imagine, like, Mad Max or Fallout, except there's demons and, like, fucking crusaders and demonic cultists running around. It's awesome. And even though the exploration is a little bit rough, like, I would say if you're going to seriously consider playing this game, there's no shame in using a guide, because Lord knows I did. There's a lot of moments in the game that just make you stop and think, like, how was I supposed to know that? And I think it generally just makes the experience a lot more kind of streamlined. But the combat has surprisingly held up very well. It's very fast-paced. Obviously, there's no press turn system, but I think there's enough there to kind of keep it interesting. And like I said, the battles go by pretty fast. So yeah, like I said, this one is more like a half recommendation. I think if you are willing to go through it, it's absolutely worth checking out. I think it genuinely still is, like, it is a good game. It's kind of just shackled by, like, the time it came out. But I think it's also worth kind of just, messing around in to kind of get a greater appreciation for the evolution of the series, and I think just how far video games have progressed in general. Unfortunately, we currently don't have an official English release of this game, so your best bet is going to be just to emulate it. There's a translation patch available, and if you got what it takes, I think SMT1 is definitely worth at least checking out. But yeah, that has been the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and big shout out to Nam for his contribution. Definitely go check him out. Lord knows he makes better videos than I do. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.